Daenerys Targaryen burned a city full of people who had already surrendered, and almost everyone who watched it happen said the same thing. It came out of nowhere. The writers broke her. It wasn't earned. 8 seasons of a hero, and then one episode turns her into a monster for no reason. Here's what I think actually happened. It wasn't sudden at all. I think the show told us, over and over, for years, exactly who Daenerys was capable of becoming. And we didn't want to hear it, because we liked her too much to listen. So here's the question I want to answer today. If you go back through every season with fresh eyes, pretending you don't already love her, how many warnings do you find? How early does the story actually start telling you the truth? Hey, let's go looking for the Daenerys nobody wanted to see coming. Now let's go all the way back to season 1. Before dragons. Before Mother of Dragons. Before any of it. Daenerys watches her husband's Khalasar burn a village and takes the women as slaves for the men to use. And what does she do? She stops it, once, for the women specifically in front of her, a moment the show frames as her first act of mercy, the birth of the woman she's going to become. Good. That's the version of Daenerys everyone remembers. But rewatch the season with a colder eye, and you start noticing something else sitting right next to the mercy. When her brother Viserys threatens her unborn child, she doesn't hesitate, doesn't negotiate, doesn't look for another way. She watches him die by molten gold poured over his head, and she watches it without flinching. Later, the show wants you to read that as justice, he had it coming. And he did. But notice the pattern forming underneath the justice. Every single time Daenerys is genuinely threatened, her response isn't caution. It's total, permanent removal of the threat. That's not villainy yet, but it's the same instinct that ends the show, present from episode 1, just aimed at someone who deserved it. But here's a question worth sitting with. How many times across 8 seasons does Daenerys respond to betrayal, disloyalty, or resistance with fire? Start counting, and it's genuinely more than you remember. The Tarly men, the ones who refused to bend the knee, burned alive, on screen, while she watches. The slave masters of Astapor and Meereen, crucified in retaliation, mirroring exactly what was done to slave children, an eye for an eye scaled up to hundreds of bodies. Randyll and Tarly specifically choose death over loyalty to her, and she grants it instantly. Without a flicker of hesitation, in front of an audience of soldiers, she needs to fall in line. Every one of these moments, taken alone, has a defense. The slavers were monstrous. The Tarlys chose their fate. Fine. But watch what happens when you stop taking them alone. Stack them next to each other, season by season, and you get a woman who has one primary tool for handling anyone who says no to her. And it is the largest, most permanent tool available. She doesn't imprison. She doesn't exile. She ends things completely. And she does it early. And she does it often. And the show keeps giving her opportunities to choose differently. And she keeps choosing the same thing. And here's the part that actually explains everything, more than any single scene of violence. By the final season, who does Daenerys have left who will tell her the truth? Ser Jorah, the one advisor who consistently pushed back on her, dead, protecting her in battle. Missandei, the closest thing she has to a genuine friend, captured and executed in front of her, specifically to break her. Varys, the one person still actively questioning whether she should rule at all, executed by her own order for exactly that questioning. One by one, every person capable of telling Daenerys, no, don't, is removed from her life. Some by enemies, but crucially, some by her own hand. By the time she's standing over King's Landing, she isn't a woman who suddenly snapped. She's a woman who has spent years closing the circle around herself until the only voices left are the ones agreeing with her, or Jon, who's just told her he doesn't want her the way she needs him to. That's not a plot twist. That's the completion of a pattern the show spent years quietly building, one loyal skeptic at a time. There's a line from season 1 people quote constantly out of context, usually as proof Daenerys was always meant to be a hero. I will take what is mine with fire and blood. People remember the fire and blood part. They forget what she's actually claiming to be owed, and how absolute her sense of entitlement is from the beginning. This isn't a woman who wants to help people and happens to have dragons. This is a woman who believes, from episode 1, that a continent she's never set foot on belongs to her by birthright. and anyone standing between her and that birthright is an obstacle rather than a person with their own legitimate claim. That's the thread underneath the breaker of chains reputation the whole time. Freeing slaves and conquering a continent you believe is rightfully yours aren't the same impulse, even though the show lets them blur together for years. One is about other people's freedom. The other is about your own inheritance. Daenerys genuinely believes in both, but only one requires anyone else's consent. And by the end, she stops waiting for it. And here's a detail that's easy to miss because it happens gradually, across years, instead of in one dramatic scene. What actually happens to Daenerys' relationship with her dragons over the course of the show? In the early seasons, they're framed almost like children. She names them after people she's lost. She's protective, even tender, in a way that humanizes her when almost nothing else about her circumstances is human. A queen with no country, no army, and no family left who hasn't betrayed or abandoned her. The dragons are the one thing in her life that are purely, uncomplicatedly hers. The one relationship nobody can twist into something political. But watch what they become by the final stretch of the show. They stop being companions and start being instruments. Weapons she deploys with increasing ease, on larger and larger scales, with less and less hesitation each time. The show is quietly tracking something here that's easy to miss if you're only watching for individual moments of cruelty rather than the trajectory underneath them. The same instinct that once made her rescue 3 fragile eggs from a funeral pyre eventually becomes the instinct that lets her level a city without a second thought. It was never really two different Daenerys. It was one continuous character, and the dragons just kept getting bigger, and the distance between protecting what's mine and destroying what threatens it kept getting smaller. In this, there's a moment worth sitting with, right before everything falls apart. Jon tells Daenerys the truth about who he is, that he has a claim to the throne that might be stronger than hers. And watch her reaction closely, because it isn't jealousy exactly, and it isn't rage. It's something closer to disbelief that the ground could possibly shift under her again, after everything she's already survived to get here. Here's the question worth asking. What has Daenerys actually built her entire identity around, since she was a terrified teenage girl sold to a warlord by her own brother? The answer is that she has built it around being the exception, the last dragon, the unburnt, the one prophecy that actually comes true. Being special isn't just something that happens to her, it's the entire foundation she's used to survive things that should have destroyed her. So when Jon reveals he might have an equal or better claim, he isn't just threatening her position on a throne. He's threatening the only story she's ever told herself about why she deserved to survive everything that came before it. That's why the isolation in the final season hits so much harder than it would for almost anyone else in this story. Most people can lose power and still have an identity underneath it. Daenerys built her identity and her claim to power as the exact same thing for her entire life, because it was the only way a frightened, abused teenager could make sense of what was happening to her. Take away the throne, and there's very little left standing underneath it. That's not an excuse, but it's the reason the ending lands as total collapse rather than a simple loss. Now wait, I want to be honest about the other side of this, because otherwise this isn't analysis. It's a hit piece. Daenerys spends most of the show doing things that are genuinely heroic. She frees actual slaves at real risk to herself, when it would have been safer to leave the institution alone and just buy an army instead. She earns the loyalty of people like Jorah, Missandei, and Grey Worm through real care. And that loyalty isn't naive. These are people who watch her closely for years and choose to stay. And there's a version of this story where King's Landing isn't really a turn at all. A woman who's just watched her closest remaining family shot out of the sky, who's just lost the 2 people closest to her to executions designed to break her, who's just been told by the man she loves that he doesn't want her the way she needs, simply runs out of anything left to lose the moment the bells of surrender ring. Grief and total isolation don't excuse what happens next, but they explain why it's her, and not someone else, standing in that moment. So maybe the honest version isn't the show ruined a hero, and it isn't she was secretly a villain all along. It's that Daenerys was always both, genuinely, at once, capable of freeing thousands of strangers and burning thousands of others, sometimes in the same season, because both impulses came from the same place. An unshakable certainty that she alone knew what the world should look like, and that anyone standing in the way of that vision was never really a person to begin with, just an obstacle, waiting to be removed. We didn't refuse to see the dark truth about Daenerys because it wasn't there. We refused to see it because for 8 seasons, she kept giving us just enough good to make the bad easy to explain away. What do you think? Was the ending earned, or did the show take a shortcut to get her there? Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you on the next one.